Welcome back, music lovers and history buffs. I'm your host, and as a devoted 1970s radio music historian, I am absolutely thrilled to be dialing the frequency back to 1978 for tonight's explainer. We are uncovering the dramatic, high-stakes rescue mission behind the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack. Because, this isn't just a story about a movie. It's a crazy tale of frantic deadlines, literal studio wizardry, and an album that practically swallowed the globe.
Now get this, believe it or not, the biggest dance movie of the decade originally had absolutely nothing to do with the Bee Gees. No way, right? As the star John Travolta pointed out, he was actually rehearsing his iconic dance sequences to Stevie Wonder and Boz Scaggs. The Bee Gees? Well, they were brought in during a total post-production panic. Imagine rehearsing the most iconic dance sequences in cinema history, only to have the entire sonic landscape swapped out on you at the 11th hour.
Okay, so here's our agenda for tonight. We're going to cover 1978, the musical crossroads, then a post-production panic, inventing the disco loop, global chart domination, and finally, the Grammys and historic legacy. Let's jump right in. Section 1, 1978, the musical crossroads. To truly understand this album, we got to paint a picture of an era that was deeply, deeply divided. 1978 was basically pulling the world in two distinct directions. On one hand, you had this raucous, day-glow critique of consumer culture coming from punk and post-punk bands. Think X-Ray Spex and Magazine. These artists were literally ripping up the rulebook. And on the flip side, you had the studio-perfected, super glossy precision of the disco and soft rock scene, championed by acts like Toto and, of course, the Bee Gees. The whole musical landscape was fracturing. So 1978 sits perfectly at this crossroads. While punk was out there opening up a dozen new chapters of restless, gritty imagination, disco was pushing crossover pop into absolute, undeniable mainstream radio dominance. The musical climate was flying in a million different directions at once. But somehow, the Bee Gees were about to unite the entire globe under one unstoppable groove.
Which brings us to Section 2, a post-production panic.
The inciting incident for all of this doesn't start in some glittering New York disco. Nope, it starts across the Atlantic with a desperate plea. The movie was already in post-production when producer Robert Stigwood called the band over in France. As Robin Gibb recalled, Stigwood just casually asked for whatever tracks they had lying around for a, quote, little film, low budget, called Tribal Rights of a Saturday Night. Get this, the Bee Gees didn't even know what the film was about. At the time, they were actually busy recording their own live album at a chateau in France. But faced with this sudden, desperate call, they pivoted hard. They wrote the massive hit tracks we all know, Stayin' Alive, Night Fever, How Deep Is Your Love, virtually in a single, frantic weekend. I mean, it is just staggering to think that the defining sounds of a whole generation were born out of a frantic weekend rush, just to help out a low-budget movie.
Now, moving on to Section 3, inventing the disco loop.
Because you see, the drama absolutely did not end in France. When the band moved over to Criteria Studios in Miami to record, a sudden crisis forced a legendary moment of musical innovation. First, their backing drummer, Dennis Bryan, had to suddenly leave due to a family emergency. To make matters worse, the early drum machines they tried to use were totally rigid and just gave unsatisfactory results. So, faced with failing tech and a missing drummer, the band and their engineers took just 2 perfect bars of the already recorded Night Fever drum track, physically cut the tape, and spliced it end to end so it would loop continuously for Staying Alive.
Talk about studio MacGyvers. They literally cut and pasted tape to build a flawless, never-ending beat. That brilliant little piece of tape manipulation became the mechanical heartbeat of modern dance music. It's crazy, right? What was born out of sheer panic and necessity ended up creating this infectious, hypnotic rhythm that DJs and producers are literally still chasing today.
All right, Section 4, Global Chart Domination. The payoff for that frantic weekend and incredible studio wizardry? Well, it was a commercial explosion unlike anything the industry had ever seen. Just look at this massive chart dominance. In the US, the soundtrack was certified 16 times platinum for shipping 16 million units. In the UK, it moved 2.2 million copies, hitting 7 times platinum. And in Canada, it achieved a super rare diamond certification with 1.4 million copies sold. The fever wasn't just an American thing, it was a global pandemic of rhythm. The specific chart numbers are honestly mind-boggling. The album held the #1 spot on the Billboard 200 for 24 straight weeks. That is almost half the year. It sold over 40 million copies worldwide, easily making it one of the best-selling albums in human history. The Bee Gees themselves accounted for 3 Hot 100 number ones that year, and fan favorite Night Fever, it reigned supreme as the longest-running number 1 single of 1978, holding the top spot for a massive 8 weeks. They literally owned the airwaves.
Which brings us to our final stop, Section 5, Grammys and Historic Legacy.
As the dust finally settled on the 1970s, this album proved it was way more than just a fleeting moment on the dance floor. It reshaped the entire critical landscape. The Bee Gees completely swept the Grammys in 1979. They secured Album of the Year, and let me emphasize this, it is still the only disco album to ever achieve that honor. They also took home awards for Best Pop Vocal Performance, Best Arrangement of Voices, and Producer of the Year. This monumental achievement legitimized disco on the highest stage possible, proving it was a genre capable of real, extraordinary musical craftsmanship.
And the legacy definitely didn't stop there. In 2012, this desperate, rushed, tape-spliced soundtrack was officially immortalized in the National Recording Registry by the Library of Congress. It was recognized for being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. It captured the total zeitgeist of the late 70s, freezing a moment of pure escapism and innovation in amber forever.
So, as we sign off tonight, I want you to think about your own musical crossroads. The 1970s had its massive shift from rock to disco to punk, but what about you? What chaotic, shifting climates helped forge the soundtracks of your life? Which rushed, panicked creations ended up defining your generation? Keep asking those questions, keep exploring the history behind the hits, and I'll catch you on the next Explainer.